There's a man in a room staring at a wall of screens, dozens of them, hundreds. One screen shows a man unlocking his front door, another a woman at a bus stop checking her watch, a child tugging at their mother's coat outside a grocery store, a nurse lighting a cigarette behind the hospital where she works. They don't see him, but he sees them, and they are ordinary, just people in transit, people in waiting. Their lives so mundane that they almost don't matter, except they do, because everything matters when it can be watched, stored, and analyzed. He leans in, rewinds, zooms in on the nurse's lighter. What brand? What color? Is she left-handed, right-handed? How long does she pause before that first drag? Click, another screen. This is how it happens. Not in one swift dystopian takeover, no jackboots marching down your street, no dramatic moment when your life is suddenly not your own. It's gradual. One law, one policy at a time, one camera on the street corner, one AI tool designed to help you, one small decision that makes things easier, more convenient, more secure. And then one day, privacy is nostalgia. Today we are going to talk about what it means to live under the permanent gaze of a world that never blinks. Not just cameras, not just tracking, surveillance as a philosophy, surveillance as a condition of existence. Because the real impact of living in a surveillance society isn't just that you're being watched, it's that you change because you're being watched. There's an old saying, character is who you are when no one is watching. So what happens when someone is always watching? Does character still exist? Think about this. You walk into an empty room and you are yourself. You scratch your face, mumble something under your breath, you slouch, you let your expression go blank. But if someone steps into the room, instantly you shift, straighten up, adjust your expression. This is human nature. The presence of an observer changes the observed. But what happens when that observer isn't a person? What if it's a system? A system that doesn't just watch what you do, but remembers, predicts, suggests, redirects. A system that isn't just looking, but expecting. And what happens to a person when they begin to perform for that system? There was a time when privacy was normal, when walking down the street didn't leave a digital footprint. Now privacy is an act of defiance. To not be seen is now suspicious. And so we live in the gaze. We shape ourselves in ways that fit the expectations of the watcher. We filter what we say, we adjust how we behave. We learn the invisible rules of the algorithm. And maybe we don't even notice anymore. Maybe we've adapted so well that the difference between who we are and who we perform as has vanished. But if that's the case, if we have become so used to being watched that we no longer resist it, then are we really ourselves anymore? Welcome to Panopticon Dreams, the psychological toll of a surveillance society. Let's begin.
835.
You wake up and for a second you think you're alone, but you're not. There's a camera at the intersection outside your window, a lens in the ATM, an algorithm chewing on the data of every step you took yesterday. A machine somewhere in the nameless data center knows what time you went to sleep, how often you roll over, the pattern of your breathing. This isn't paranoia. Paranoia is suspecting you're being watched. This is certainty. You know you're being watched. This is the digital Panopticon. Jeremy Bentham designed the original Panopticon, a circular prison where inmates couldn't see the guards, but the guards could always see them. The genius of it wasn't the surveillance itself. The genius was psychological. If you think you're being watched, you behave as if you are. You internalize the gaze, you become your own jailer. Now look around. Your prison has no walls, no guard towers, but you feel it, don't you? That pressure, the idea that at any moment, somewhere, someone or something is watching. So you behave, you regulate yourself, you edit the things you say, the things you write, the things you even dare to think. You don't even know that you're doing it. This is the perfect surveillance state, one where control isn't enforced, it's voluntary. where the prisoners become complicit in their own captivity. You police yourself because you don't know when the eye is on you, but you know it is somewhere. You think you have free will, you think you're a rational being, a person making choices, but you've never really tested that, have you? Because every time you click, every time you scroll, every time your eyes linger on an image a fraction of a second longer than expected, someone is watching, someone is measuring. Not a person, a machine. A system built not to watch you, the person, but you, the data set. A profile constructed from your search history, your purchase patterns, the timestamps on your messages, the pace of your typing, is better at predicting you than you are. It knows when you're about to be hungry. It knows when you're about to be sad. It knows when you're about to break up with your girlfriend before you do. Because your behavior is a pattern, and patterns can be tracked, measured, and sold. You are not an individual. You are a cluster of probabilities. And the digital Panopticon doesn't just watch you, it nudges you, feeds you the right ad, suggests the right video, shapes your choices without you ever realizing it. 1,000 tiny manipulations, so subtle, so incremental, you never noticed the cage closing around you. They told you privacy was a right. Then they told you privacy was dead. Then they sold it back to you in the form of subscription models. Pay extra for a private browsing mode, pay extra to remove tracking, pay extra for encrypted messaging. Privacy, once a default, is now a luxury. And the worst part is that we accepted it. We shrugged and said, well, I've got nothing to hide. Like you don't understand. Like you don't see how it's not about what you have to hide, but what they have the power to see. It's not about guilt. It's about control. Information is power. And if they know everything about you, your habits, your fears, your desires, then tell me who really holds the power. Because it's not you. It's never you. The part about all of this that should keep us awake at night is that we don't even exist anymore. Not the real us. Because the digital Panopticon isn't just watching this version of us. It's watching every version of us that's ever existed. Every comment, every post, every joke we made in 2012, it's all still there. You think that you've changed, but the system disagrees. To the algorithm, you're a series of snapshots frozen in time, and if someone wants to, they can rewind your life like a tape recorder. They can take a version of you from 10 years ago and make it the only version of you that matters. And the worst part is that it can manufacture you. AI-generated voices, deepfake images, a digital ghost that wears your face, speaks in your voice, says things that you never said. You don't control yourself anymore. You are whoever the machine says you are. So what's the answer? Now you might think that you can escape. Go off the grid, delete your account, smash all of those devices. I mean, of course, but try buying a plane ticket without a digital footprint. Try applying for a job without an online presence. Try proving who you are without data backing you up. That's the final trick of the digital Panopticon. You can't leave. Because the moment you disconnect, you become invisible. And in a world built on surveillance, to be invisible is to not exist at all. So you stay, and you behave. Because somewhere in some faceless server farm, the eye is still watching. And you don't know when, and you don't know where. And you don't know what happens when you step out of line. There it is, the digital Panopticon. Not just a system, not just cameras and databases and trackers, but a new kind of reality. A world where the walls are made of data. A prison where you're the prisoner, the guard, and the warden all at once, and you don't even realize it. Because the best kind of prison is the one where you never even try to escape. You were born into a faith. Not Christianity, not Islam, not Buddhism, not anything ancient, not something carved in stone or whispered in Latin. You were born into the church of data. You just didn't realize it. Think about what makes a god. They're omniscient, they're omnipresent, they're omnipotent. Now think about data. Data knows everything. What you search for, what you buy, what you fear. It knows your past, your present, and based on probabilities, it knows your future. Data is everywhere. It moves through cables under the ocean, satellites in the sky, microchips in your pocket. It's embedded in the walls of cities, lurking in street cameras, waiting in the circuits of your car, your fridge, your doorbell. And data is power. Nations rise and fall based on data. Wars are fought over it. Corporations worship it. Governments depend on it. A God that doesn't need faith to exist. It doesn't need you to believe in it, because it already believes in you. It believes in what you do, what you click, what you consume. It believes in the numbers that define you, your habits, your purchases, your location history. It sees you, and it judges you. And it does what every God has ever done. It decides your fate. Once upon a time, sins could be washed away. Confess to a priest, get absolution, burn an offering, beg forgiveness, sin today, atone tomorrow. But not anymore. Data is the new God, and it does not forgive. Your sins are etched in silicon. Your bad takes from 2010, your drunk texts, your questionable searches. Every version of you that ever existed is still out there waiting to be called forth. You think that you've grown, that you've learned. The God of data disagrees. It remembers who you were, not who you think you are. The new church has no priests, no confessions, no absolution. Your sins are forever. 1,000 years ago, judgment was divine. You were judged by the gods, by their rules, their scriptures, a mysterious, ineffable force. Now you are judged by an algorithm. You don't see it, you don't hear it, but it decides whether you get a loan, whether you get the job, whether you can board that plane, whether your insurance premium goes up. And the thing about algorithms is they don't care about context. They don't care that your bad credit was because of medical bills. They don't care that your weird Google search was just research for a novel. They don't care that your joke was just a joke. They only care about patterns. They don't judge you as an individual, they judge you as data. And the worst part is that you don't even know what the rules are. You don't know what line you crossed. You just know that one day your application gets rejected, your post gets shadow banned, your account gets locked. You become a digital heretic. And the system does not explain itself. Because gods never have to explain themselves. Now, how do you worship this new God? Well, it's simple. You feed it. Every search, every click, every tap, swipe, and form you fill out, every decision you make, the system logs it. Every pause, every hesitation, every late-night impulse buy. And you do it voluntarily. You offer up your data willingly, constantly, without hesitation. You build your own shrine, brick by brick, out of numbers and metadata and timestamps. And in return, the God rewards you. It shows you what you want. It feeds you the right ads, the right videos, the right distractions. It gives you convenience, comfort, belonging. Until one day, you can't imagine your life without it. A world without the algorithm guiding you, without the feed curating your reality, it would feel empty. You need it. And that's what true faith looks like. Every religion has its prophets, the people who spread the gospel, the ones who tell you how to live, how to obey, how to belong. And in the church of data, the prophets are not monks in robes. They are the engineers at Google, the AI researchers, the social media executives. They don't stand on mountaintops but in boardrooms. They don't preach with scripture but with code. They decide how the algorithm thinks, what it values, what it suppresses. They don't need to command you, they just need to nudge you. A tweak to the feed, a shift in the recommendation algorithm. And just like that, an entire population starts believing something new. And the best part is that they'll think it was their own idea. You can try to leave, you can try to opt out, delete your account, stop using those smart devices, maybe pay in cash instead of card. But the thing about gods is that they don't need you to believe in them to exist. They exist whether you worship or not. Data is still being collected on you. Your face is in security cameras. Your past is still archived somewhere. You are still a statistic in someone's database. To be truly invisible, you'd have to erase yourself completely. And in a world where existence is measured in data points, what happens when you have none? You become a ghost. No credit history, no online presence, no social proof. You don't escape the system, you just become an anomaly. And anomalies get flagged, investigated, watched even closer. Because in a world where data is God, the greatest sin is refusing to exist. You may think that you own yourself, but your thoughts are being mapped, your preferences are being shaped. You are a believer whether you like it or not. The question isn't whether data is God. The question is, what kind of God does it become? And what happens when it stops needing you at all? The system tells you that if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. You've heard this before, from politicians justifying new surveillance laws, from tech CEOs defending data collection, from people in comment sections who think privacy is only for criminals, dissenters, and degenerates. But this idea, this whole notion that only the guilty should worry, is a lie, a distraction, a convenient little myth that turns mass surveillance into a moral issue instead of a power issue. The real question is who gets to decide what should be hidden, and who gets to decide what should be feared. As much as we may be convinced otherwise, privacy is not a crime. Think about everything in your life that is private, not because it's illegal, not because it's shameful, but because it's yours. The way you talk to your partner when no one else is around, the books you read late at night, the Google searches you do when you're anxious, the unfiltered thoughts you scribble into a journal that no one will ever read. None of this is criminal. None of this is dangerous, but it is personal. Now imagine every single one of those things being recorded, categorized, and analyzed. Not just by governments, not just by corporations, but by everyone. Your boss, your co-workers, your parents, your ex, the stranger who sits behind you in class. Because that's what the nothing to hide argument really means. It means you should be comfortable living like an open book with every page available to be flipped through by anyone at any time for any reason. And if that makes you uncomfortable, because it makes me pretty fucking uncomfortable, if that idea of being constantly exposed feels violating, then congratulations, you're not paranoid, you're just a human being. Privacy isn't about secrets, it's about control. The ability to decide who gets access to you, who gets to see what, and who gets to know the details of your existence. And the moment you give up that control, you are no longer the author of your own story. Let's talk about power for a minute. Because mass surveillance isn't about preventing crime. That's the excuse, the bullshit press release, the official line. The reality is that surveillance is about control. It's about predictability. It's about shaping behavior before any crime has even occurred. The biggest lie they sell you is that surveillance is passive, that it just sits there like an invisible security guard, watching for wrongdoing, doing nothing until someone steps out of line. But that is not how it works. Surveillance shapes behavior. If you know you're being watched, you start to censor yourself. You start editing your thoughts before you even think them. You don't search for certain terms, you don't express certain opinions, you don't take certain risks, you don't read certain books or visit certain websites or write certain ideas down. And you don't even realize that it's happening, but little by little you adjust. You become a curated version of yourself, the one that's safest to be under the constant gaze of the system. And the end result is a society that is self-regulating, a world where people don't have to be locked up, punished, or even threatened, because they've already trained themselves to stay within the lines. A world where freedom still exists on paper, but in practice, everyone behaves as if there's an invisible gun to their head. The most dangerous part of the nothing to hide lie is it assumes that the rules never change, that what is acceptable today will still be acceptable tomorrow, that the things you say, the beliefs you hold, the books you read will always be harmless. But history disagrees. Look at every regime, every dictatorship, every moment in history where people were suddenly declared criminals, not because they did something wrong, but because the rules shifted beneath their feet. Look at the people who spoke out against injustice before it was safe to do so. The activists, the whistleblowers, the revolutionaries, the ones who exposed corruption, fought for civil rights, resisted oppression. By today's standards, we see them as heroes, but at the time they were criminals, traitors, enemies of the state. If Martin Luther King had been born in an era of total digital surveillance, every private conversation, every plan, every speech draft would have been logged, analysed and used against him before he could even march. If George Orwell, the man who literally warned us about mass surveillance, had written 1984 in a world where every document is auto-scanned for dangerous ideas, would his book have even made it to print? You don't get to decide what's safe and what's dangerous. The people watching do. The people with the power to redefine what should be hidden and what should be feared. And if they suddenly decide that you're dangerous, then it won't matter how innocent you think you are. Because when the system turns against you, when you realize that you suddenly do have something to hide, it will already be too late. One more thing. The idea that surveillance is there to protect you, that if you are not a criminal, the system has no interest in you, is pure fantasy. Because surveillance isn't just watching, it's collecting. And the people in power don't collect things for no reason. They use them. Not always today, not always tomorrow, but eventually. And when that time comes, when you suddenly find that some old piece of data from years ago is being dragged out of the archives and used to define you, what then? What happens when your insurance company gets access to your medical records and raises your rates based on your lifestyle? What happens when your job application gets rejected because an AI cross-referenced your teenage social media posts and decided you weren't the right culture fit? What happens when the government decides that your past political opinions make you a national security risk? What happens when you suddenly do have something to hide, but it's already too late to hide it? If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. This is what they tell you. This is the lie. Because the point of privacy was never about hiding, it was about freedom. The freedom to think without fear, the freedom to express without self-censorship, the freedom to exist without constantly feeling the pressure of an unseen audience, judging, waiting and collecting. You are not safer because you have nothing to hide, you are only more vulnerable. Because the moment you believe this lie, the moment you accept that privacy is only for the guilty, you are already in the cage. You are already under the control of a system that doesn't see you as a person, but as a data point. And data points don't have rights, they don't have a voice, they don't protest when it's used against you. So go ahead. Keep telling yourself you have nothing to hide, and pray that the people in charge never decide you were wrong. You think you know who you are. You have a name, a body, a history. Maybe you define yourself by the things you love, the books on your shelf, the music in your playlist, the ideas that swirl inside your head when no one else is around. Maybe you define yourself by experience, by memory, by the slow accumulation of days and choices that have shaped the person sitting here right now listening to this. But what if I told you there's another you? A version of you that doesn't live inside your skull but inside a machine, a digital doppelganger. It doesn't breathe, it doesn't think, it doesn't have dreams, regrets or that flicker of self-doubt that makes you human. But it does exist, and it's made entirely of data. Every time you log in, every time you scroll, every time you pause for a half second longer on a certain type of image, a certain kind of article, every purchase, every click, every search, every hesitation is all there. A perfect shadow, a second self, one that you don't control. Once, the only way that someone knew what you were thinking was if you told them. Now, your identity doesn't just exist inside you, it exists out there, floating in the ether, stored in databases you will never see, owned by companies you've never met. The moment you first logged into the internet, the moment you first typed your name into a sign-up form, you started building a duplicate. Not on purpose or with intention, but the moment you entered that system, the system started shaping a version of you out of raw information. It started with simple things, your name, your birthday, where you live. Then came your habits, what you like, what you hate, how long you linger on a website before getting bored. Then came your patterns, the things you do without thinking, the way you type, the time of day you're most active, the kind of ads you ignore versus the ones you secretly consider clicking on. Then it got deeper. Your fears, your desires, the way you react when you see bad news versus good news, the kinds of arguments that make your blood pressure spike. the exact moment in the day when you're most likely to break down and buy something you don't need. The digital doppelganger is built from everything you do, even the things you don't notice. And the most terrifying part is that it might know you better than you do. You are made of flesh and blood and memory. The digital you is made of numbers. You live your life moment by moment, forgetting things as soon as they happen, your past fading into fog, your future unknowable. The digital you never forgets. It never loses track. It doesn't let embarrassing memories fade away, doesn't let old habits die. It doesn't allow you to grow, to change, and to evolve. It freezes you in time. And for the people who run this machine, that version of you, the machine-readable you, is worth more than the one sitting in your chair right now. Because the real you is unpredictable. The real you might change your mind, take a risk, do something out of character. But the data version of you can be measured, categorized, and sold. And that's all that really matters. To them, you are not a person. You are a set of probabilities. They don't care about who you are. They don't care about who you're most likely to become. What you're most likely to buy, who you're most likely to vote for, what cause you're most likely to support, and which way you'll jump when a crisis happens. And once they have that, they don't just predict your future, they shape it. Now, the problem with being turned into a machine-readable version of yourself is that you lose the right to define who you are. Because when your past is permanent, it owns you. Maybe you've grown, maybe you've changed. Maybe the person you were 5 years ago is someone you wouldn't even recognize today. Doesn't matter, because the data still exists. And in the eyes of the system, you are still that person. That version of you, frozen in ones and zeros, is the version they will judge you by. And the worst part is that the more the world depends on the digital you, the less control the real you has over your own existence. Try applying for a loan when your data says you're at risk. Try getting a job when your old search history gets flagged by an algorithm that assumes you're unstable, untrustworthy, or too different from the safe and predictable norm. Try convincing someone that you're not the version of yourself that a machine has built. It doesn't matter if it's wrong. It doesn't matter if you aren't that person anymore. Because once the system decides who you are, you don't get to argue. There is a moment coming, sooner than you think, when the digital you will matter more than the physical one. Because flesh and blood people, we're slow. We take time to think, to feel, to decide. But data is instant. It predicts, it preempts. Already the world treats data as more real than reality. If the algorithm says you're dangerous, you are, whether or not you've done anything. If the system marks your behavior as suspicious, it doesn't matter what your actual intentions were. If a deepfake version of you appears online saying things you never said, doing things you never did, doesn't matter if it's fake. Because in the eyes of the machine, in the eyes of the system, that is you now. And there is nothing you can do about it. We used to believe that identity was something internal, something ours. Now it belongs to the Panopticon, to the algorithms, to the people who have more control over your past, present, and future than you do. Because you don't own your digital self. It owns you. And the worst part is that you can never escape it. Because in the eyes of the machine, you are not a person, you're a file. Files don't have free will or rights or protests when they're rewritten. And we can try and outrun this shadow, but the digital doppelganger never sleeps, never blinks, never forgets. We live in a world where everything we do is recorded. Every action, every fleeting moment of indecision, catalogued, analysed, and dissected. Our life is reduced to data points scattered across 1,000 faceless servers in nameless buildings. And yet for all this observation, does anyone actually see you? You exist in the system. The algorithm recognises your patterns, your choices, the subtle rhythms of your digital life. But meaning, purpose, those things don't matter here. Because in a surveillance society, there is no meaning. Only metrics, only numbers, only the cold, indifferent calculation of cause and effect. There was a time when privacy meant something. It meant that there were parts of you that belonged only to yourself. That not every thought had to be shared, not every action had to be documented, and not every moment had to be transformed into content, into a transaction, into something usable. But now, privacy is a relic, an old superstition, something people talk about in the past tense. We traded it away for convenience, for efficiency, for the illusion of safety. And in the process, we lost something deeper. Because when everything is seen, nothing is special. There was a time when taking a photograph was significant. You had to think about it, frame it, make it count. Now you take 100 pictures before breakfast and half of them disappear into the void. There was a time when writing meant something, when the act of committing words to paper was deliberate. Now you send 1,000 messages a day, all of them temporary, all of them disposable. There was a time when memory was sacred, when forgetting was just as important as remembering. Now the system remembers for you. And because of that, you never really own your own past anymore. When everything is captured, stored, and searchable, nothing is intimate, nothing is personal, nothing is truly yours. And meaning comes from the things we choose to keep, from the memories we decide to remember. When everything is remembered for us, when it's all permanent and tracked and archived, what does meaning even look like anymore? It used to be something that we created. We defined ourselves by the choices we made, the roads we took, the things that we left behind. The past was a story you could rewrite and reinterpret and outgrow. Now the past is permanent. Now you are nothing but an accumulation of data, a predictable pattern waiting to be processed. The Panopticon doesn't just watch you, it categorizes you. It tells you what you like before you even know you like it. It predicts what you'll do before you even do it. It builds a statistical model of you so detailed that the version of you inside the machine starts to feel more real than the one in your own head. And what happens when the machine knows you better than you do yourself? You stop questioning. You stop wondering who you could be, because the algorithm already decided. You don't explore. You don't make unexpected choices. You just follow the script written for you by a system that doesn't care about meaning, only engagement. You aren't choosing, you're being herded. And the worst part is that you think it's your own idea. Now imagine that you're in a room, completely alone. No cameras, no mirrors, no audience. Ask yourself, who are you? Not who you present yourself as. Not the version of you that's been shaped by social norms, by surveillance and the unseen pressure of always being watched, but you. Can you even answer that? Can you even separate the real you from the version of you that's been curated for observation? This is what the surveillance society does. It kills authenticity, because when you know you're being watched, you change. You second guess yourself, you perform, you adjust. You start thinking in terms of how you appear, not who you are. You filter your words, you self-censor your thoughts, you craft a version of yourself that's acceptable, that fits the invisible rules of the system, that doesn't draw too much attention. And slowly, the real you disappears. It gets buried under layers of optimization, social acceptability, and brand-conscious thinking. You become a spectator in your own life, watching yourself as if you were a product, an image, a profile in a database. And at some point, you stop being able to tell the difference. At some point, the performance becomes the only thing left. But we forget that we need mystery to stay sane. We need the unknown, the hidden, the things that don't have answers. A world where everything is recorded is a world without mystery, without wonder, without uncertainty. And without those things, life becomes flat, predictable, lifeless. The surveillance society doesn't just watch us, it sterilizes existence. It removes ambiguity. It reduces everything down to patterns and data points. There's no room for interpretation, no space for contradiction, no place for the messy, chaotic, irrational aspects of being human. You become a collection of analytics, a machine-readable entity. Something that can be understood too well, until nothing about you is interesting anymore, not even to yourself. And when you know you are just a set of statistics, when you know every part of you has already been analyzed and decoded, what's left to discover? What's left to feel? What's left to matter? Once, meaning was something you had to find. Now meaning is something given to you, pre-packaged, algorithmically generated, wrapped in the illusion of choice but designed to keep you predictable and manageable and profitable. But real meaning, the kind that makes life worth living, doesn't come from the external. It doesn't come from being seen. It comes from what you keep to yourself. And that's exactly what they're trying to take away. Because when nothing is private, when nothing is sacred, when every thought, every action, every intimate moment of your life is part of the system, what's left? What belongs to you? Nothing. Not even yourself. You've spent the last however long this episode is staring into the eye of the surveillance society. You've seen how it shapes you, how it rewires your mind, and how it forces you to perform for an audience that you'll never see. You've seen the digital Panopticon, the perfect prison where the bars are invisible but the effects are real. You've seen how the system predicts you, molds you, controls you, and you've seen what it takes from you. Your privacy, your identity, your ability to define yourself outside of data, algorithms, and constant observation. Most importantly, you've seen what it does to meaning itself. Because when everything is watched, nothing is sacred. When every action is recorded, nothing is personal. And when every moment is captured, stored, and categorized, nothing is truly yours anymore. This is the world we live in now, where your past is never erased, where your identity is a file in a server farm, and where the machine doesn't just see you, it knows you. And whether you realize it or not, you've already changed because of it. You don't need to be followed by men in dark suits. You don't need cameras tracking your every step. That's not how control works anymore. The new world doesn't need to imprison you physically, because you police yourself. You don't type certain things, you don't search for certain topics, you don't express certain opinions. You adjust, you filter, you reshape yourself into a safe, predictable, acceptable version of who you might have been. And you do it automatically because you know the eye is there somewhere. Maybe it's an algorithm reading your emails. Maybe it's a social credit system tracking your purchases. Maybe it's a faceless corporation deciding whether you're a liability based on data you don't even remember creating. But it doesn't matter because it works. You've internalized the gaze. You've accepted the role of both prisoner and warden. You perform, you behave, you comply, and maybe you don't even notice anymore. Your physical self, your body, your thoughts, your memories used to be the real you. Now that's just a biological inconvenience attached to the real version of you, the one stored in a database. You don't own yourself anymore. Your data self, your doppelganger, is more valuable than your physical one. It decides whether you get a loan, whether you pass a job screening, or whether you're flagged as a risk. It moves faster than you, making decisions before you even act. And if that data self becomes corrupted or misinterpreted, good luck arguing with the algorithm. Because in this world, the machine's version of you is more real than you are, and that version never dies. Once, meaning was something that you created. Now it's something you consume, something the system feeds you, algorithmically curated, optimized for engagement, designed to keep you watching, clicking, and scrolling. You don't search for knowledge anymore. Knowledge is pushed to you, filtered, manipulated, tailored to fit the person the system expects you to be. You don't get lost in ideas. You don't stumble upon things by accident. You don't explore without a digital trail leading you exactly where they want you to go. The mystery is gone. Serendipity is dead. And in a world where everything is seen, tracked, and remembered, the most dangerous thing you can lose is the ability to question the reality being constructed around you. So now we're here, the end of this episode, the moment where I imagine you expect some kind of answer. How do you escape the gaze? How do you reclaim your privacy? How do you become something more than a watched object, more than a predictable consumer, more than just another digital shadow trapped in the system? The truth is that you can't escape it completely, not without erasing yourself, not without abandoning the world as it is, not without becoming an anomaly in a system that punishes the invisible just as much as it controls the seen. But you can resist in small ways. You can choose what you share, what you give away, what you let define you. You can remember that your thoughts, your ideas, your inner life, those are still yours. As long as you keep something that isn't for the watchers, something that exists outside of the machine, something that can't be turned into data, then maybe you haven't lost everything yet. Maybe there's still something left of you that belongs only to you. Maybe, in a world where the eye never blinks, you can still find a way to exist without always being seen. And if you can do that, then maybe you're still human after all. Thank you, you beautiful lot, for spending your time with me today. Your presence and your attention are deeply appreciated. And of course, if you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the podcast, leaving a review, or sharing it with others who might find it interesting. Your support helps us to continue to bring you this sort of content. Now, as always, if anything in this episode has resonated with you in any way, then I would love to hear from you. You can share your stories on our website at theobservingeye.com, or here comes the huge, big fuck-off hypocrisy part, on social media, which I loathe, but we have to use it because it's all part of this marketing bullshit. So you can find us on YouTube, which is youtube.com/@theobservingeye. And we're on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter with the handle @theobservingeye as well. So if you frequent those dens of iniquity, then you're very welcome to come and follow us on there. It's basically snippets of this shit. I've also got an email which I opened up just after the new year, and I thought it'd be an interesting experiment to see if people want to ask me questions or recommend things to cover in future podcasts. So you can send me a message at david@theobservingeye.com, and that's the letter I, not the gelatinous organ through which you see. Remember that bit. So you can send me emails. I answer them myself, and I get back to you as soon as I can, which is generally within a day or so, because I don't get flooded, put it that way. And that's it. That's it for today. Take care, everybody. Much love, and I'll catch you soon.